Hello, everybody. We're here again with Four Quarters with Coach Mark Mandell. Coach has just finished a successful football season. Go Mustangs. Here's a topic sometimes we like to skirt and it's hard to ask questions about. Domestic violence during the holidays. Coach, can you share some of your insights?
Sure will, Paul. Unfortunately, domestic violence across America is an ugly truth that occurs in households here in Michigan, locally, and it's an issue that's got to be addressed. Before I go on any farther, I would say this. There are red flags that could lead to domestic violence in the first place. So if you're having issues with your marriage, I would highly recommend, and I'm talking about serious issues, and if you're drinking with your spouse and that tends to increase the temperature of the conversation, then I would stay away from the alcohol. If you're in the middle of a divorce and you and your wife are going at it, that tends to raise the heat. Often that could lead to a domestic violence. So it's not for me to lecture about what precipitates domestic violence. I think it's sort of self-explanatory. If you know and you sort of feel that there could be issues of domestic violence about to occur, seek help, seek counseling. Because if you get charged with domestic violence, it's a very tough process. So, Paul, would you like to ask me some questions about being charged with domestic violence?
Yeah, I would, Coach. And first and foremost, what happens when that call gets made? Whether it's my neighbor or my spouse or my child, they've now called the police. What should I expect next?
All right. Well, that's a great question, Paul. If you roll back the clock prior to even before I was practicing 30 years ago, often police would come out there. Maybe the police officer would even know the family and they would try to play mediator and settle things down and then move on from that. Over the years, our legislature, local politicians, judges, everybody takes domestic violence, and rightfully so, a lot more serious, because often when a police officer is sent there one time, it won't be the last time. Okay, so if a call is made, which is a great question, I'm generally telling you, especially across Southeast Michigan, you could expect that someone's going to be arrested.
Thanks, Coach. By the way, is there a difference between assault and battery? I often hear it spoke simultaneously, but is there a legal difference?
That's a great question. So many people come into my office when they have been charged with domestic violence, and maybe we are under the assumption of we were just arguing, I didn't hit my spouse, I didn't choke. Those are all terrible examples of domestic violence. But here are some specific examples of domestic violence to specifically address your question, Paul. An assault. All right, so when you're charged with domestic violence, all domestic violence really is an assault and or battery on a loved one. All assault could be nothing more than a threat. And I'm not even going to use specific examples of threatening assaultive words. But you make threats to your spouse or your loved one, you could be charged with assault and battery. Here's another one as it relates to battery. A battery is nothing more than an unconsented touching. So often I will get a phone call by somebody saying, hey, I got charged with domestic violence and I didn't push or I didn't hit my husband or my wife. But often what you hear is I grabbed their hand when they were making a phone call, telling them there's no need to call the police. Just grabbing your spouse's hand while they're making a phone call amounts to battery. That's a non-consensual touching. So there's a wide range that you could be charged with assault and battery.
Coach, what happens if I am in fact charged and found guilty of domestic violence? What should I expect?
Generally, Paul, there's two types of categories, especially as it relates to married couples. One, maybe they're in the middle of a divorce and there's no love lost if that issue happens. The first thing that's going to happen is when you go through the court system and plead not guilty, you're not going to be allowed back in the house. All right? So if you're husband and wife and you're going through a divorce, guess what? You're out of the house at that point. You're out of the house through the entire process unless your spouse will let you back in at a later time and date, and it's usually not until the case has been resolved or you're on probation. Alternatively, spouses may get in an argument, and let's just call it a real bad argument, no physicality, and one of the two, husband or wife, calls the police, and then the next day it's buyer's remorse. So now you've been charged with domestic violence. You're going to be arraigned, and that's pleading not guilty in front of a judge within 24 hours after you've been arrested. But here's the thing, the judge isn't going to let you go back in the house. And then whether, again, it's the husband or wife, they may be calling the prosecutor like, hey, please don't charge, please don't charge. Once you're in the system, and you're out of the house until you can get a hold of a lawyer to get in front of a judge and to see what we can do for you.
Coach Mandell, I'm concerned that when I get sentenced, I don't know what to expect. Can you help me there?
The courts are very thorough on sentencing on domestic violences. So you're looking in excess of a couple $1,000s in fines, costs, penalties. If your spouse or loved one that you live with doesn't want you back in the house, you're not getting back in that house, probably for a year. Generally, probation on domestic violences are 1 year of probation. You're also facing pretty much anywhere in Southeast Michigan, no alcohol or illegal drugs, and they're going to test you. Even if there was not alcohol or drugs involved, the premise of the sentencing judge is that it's just pouring kerosene on a fire. So there'll be no drinking or any type of illegal drugs for that matter. And then finally, you're looking at some extensive domestic violence counseling. Often most courts here in Southeast Michigan, Northville, Plymouth, Wayne, Novi, Canton, Westland, you're looking at a 26-week course often on issues with domestic violence. So the sentencing is very tough on domestic violence. Again, I would highly recommend if you've been charged with domestic violence that you reach out, give me a phone call, and we could discuss the matter.
Thanks, Coach Mandell. This is Paul Bohn at Fausone Bohn, wrapping up with 4 quarters with Coach Mark Mandell.